welcome. Somewhere past the last road, where the sand runs all the way to the sky, there is a hermit who has lived among the dunes longer than anyone can say. Tonight, he is sitting by a small fire, low and steady, and there is room enough beside it for you. You do not need to bring anything with you. Not your worries, not your plans, not even your name. Just come and sit. Before we begin, feel free to notice the weight of your body settling into wherever you are lying. Notice the air on your skin. That is enough to start. Thank you for joining us here at the fire. Let us begin. There is a well not far from the hermit's fire, old and half forgotten, that the local travelers call the deep well, though no one alive has ever found its bottom. The hermit says most people spend their whole lives trying to fill a well like that one, pouring in more and more, always thinking that this time, finally, it will be enough to reach the bottom and rest. But wanting was never built with a bottom in it. You can pour a lifetime into it, and it will still ask for more, not because it is broken, but because that is simply its nature. It is not something that can be won. It can only be set down. There is an old story the hermit tells about a young trader who crossed the desert every season, buying and selling, always chasing the next good deal. One year, a wandering merchant told him about an oasis hidden deep in the dunes, said to have water so sweet that one drink would satisfy any thirst for the rest of a person's life. The trader had never heard of such a place, and he could not stop thinking about it. He left his usual route and searched. He crossed ridges he had never crossed before. He asked every traveler he met. Some said the oasis lay to the east. Others said west. A few said it did not exist at all. Still, he searched, certain that once he found it, he would finally be able to rest. Week passed. His supplies grew thin. His camel grew tired. And one evening, exhausted, he came upon a small spring he had passed a dozen times before on his usual trade route. Water he had drunk from 100 times without a second thought. He knelt and drank from it, simply because there was nothing else. And as the water settled in him, he realized something. His thirst was gone. Not because this was the legendary spring. It was ordinary water, the same as always. His thirst was gone because he had finally stopped looking for a different water than the one in front of him. The hermit says the oasis the trader searched for was never hidden in the dunes. It was hidden in his own restlessness. The moment the restlessness quieted, an ordinary spring became enough. This is worth noticing in your own life. Not the big search for something legendary, but the small, ordinary ache of always thinking that satisfaction is one step further down the road. The next paycheck, the next achievement, the next place you have not yet been. The well has no bottom because it was never meant to be filled. It was only ever meant to be walked away from. Take a slow breath in and let it go, the way water settles once it stops being stirred. The hermit keeps very little at his fire. A blanket, a cup, a knife, worn smooth from years of use. He says it is not because he dislikes things. It is because he has learned the difference between what he needs and what he only thinks he needs. There is a story he tells about two travelers who once crossed the dunes together, each carrying a pack on their back. One traveler filled his pack with everything he thought he might need. Extra cloth in case of cold nights. Extra food in case the journey took longer than planned. Small trinkets he had collected along the way, each one meaning something to him. By the third day, his shoulders ached constantly. By the fifth day, he could barely stand upright under the weight. The other traveler carried only what the day required. Water enough for the distance ahead, a single cloth, nothing more. His pack was light, and each morning he woke rested. Each evening he arrived at camp with energy still in him. One evening, the first traveler, exhausted and sore, asked the second, "How do you carry so little and never seem to tire?" The second traveler said, "I do not carry less because I need less. I carry less because I have learned to ask, at every mile, does this still serve me? And when the answer is no, I set it down." The first traveler thought about this, and that same night emptied half his pack onto the sand. Cloth he had not needed in days. Trinkets that had grown heavier with every mile, though they weighed the same as when he first packed them. In the morning, His shoulders were sore but lighter, and by midday the soreness too had eased. The hermit says this is true of more than a traveler's pack. We carry old arguments long after they are finished. We carry old versions of ourselves long after we have outgrown them. We carry worries about things that have not happened yet and may never happen at all. None of it is required. It only feels required because we packed it so long ago we forgot we were the ones who chose to carry it. Tonight, you do not have to set everything down at once. Just notice one thing you are carrying that no longer serves you, and let it rest on the sand for a while. You can pick it back up tomorrow if you still need it. Most nights, you will find you do not. Let your shoulders soften. Let the sand hold whatever you are ready to set down, even just for tonight. Travelers who pass through the desert for the first time often say the same thing to the hermit. It feels so empty out here, so much nothing. The hermit always smiles at this. He has lived here long enough to know that the desert is not empty at all. It is full of wind moving over distant ridges, of small creatures beginning their night, of heat leaving the sand slowly, hour by hour, into the cooling air. People mistake stillness for emptiness because they are used to noise standing in for meaning. If nothing is happening loudly, they assume nothing is happening at all. There is a story the hermit tells about a young apprentice who once traveled with him for a season, eager to learn everything the hermit knew. The apprentice grew frustrated during the long, quiet stretches of walking. "When will you teach me something?" he would ask. "We have walked for days, and you have said almost nothing." The hermit said nothing in response, which frustrated the apprentice even further. One evening, a sudden sandstorm rose without warning. The wind howled. Sand filled the air so thick that neither of them could see more than an arm's length ahead. They knelt low, covered their faces, and waited it out, unable to do anything but endure it. When the storm passed, as suddenly as it began, the apprentice, shaken, asked, "What do we do now?" The hermit said simply, "Now we notice how quiet it has become." And it was true. After the storm, the silence felt different than before, deeper somehow, as though the desert itself were resting. The apprentice sat with this new silence, and, for the first time on the whole journey, he did not ask for a lesson. He simply listened. Later, he understood. That had been the lesson all along. Not something the hermit said, but something the apprentice finally stopped waiting to be told, and instead noticed for himself. The hermit says most teaching happens this way, not through words poured into you, but through stillness that finally has room to be noticed once the noise, inside and out, settles enough to let it through. You do not need a storm to pass through your life to notice this stillness. You only need to stop assuming that quiet means nothing is here. Let the quiet around you be full rather than empty. Notice what is here rather than what is missing. Each night, the hermit builds a small fire, and each night he says the same thing to any traveler who joins him. Watch how the fire behaves. It does not reach for the wood. It does not chase the log across the sand demanding to be fed. It simply burns where it is, steady, and the wood comes to it, or it does not. And either way, the fire keeps its own quiet nature. There is a story of an old woman who lived at the edge of a trading town, known for a calm that nothing seemed to disturb. Neighbors would come to her with their troubles, expecting to find someone who had escaped all hardship. Instead, they found someone who had lost as much as anyone: a husband, years of harvests to drought, a home to fire, and yet she remained steady through all of it. A young woman finally asked her directly, "How is it that so much has been taken from you, and still you are at peace?" The old woman said, "Because I stopped asking life to hand me what it was not offering. When the harvest failed, I grieved it fully, and then I turned to what the season did offer instead. When my house burned, I grieved that too, and then I built again with what remained. I do not reach for what is not here. I tend to what is." The young woman asked, "But does that not mean giving up on what you truly want?" The old woman shook her head. "It means wanting what is actually in front of me, instead of what is only in my mind. The fire does not suffer for lack of wood it does not have. It simply burns with what has been given to it, fully, without complaint. That is not giving up. That is the opposite. that is how you keep burning at all. The hermit says, most suffering comes not from what we lack, but from the reaching itself, the constant leaning toward what is not here instead of tending to what is. Tonight, you do not have to reach for anything. The fire in front of you, whatever form it takes in your life right now, is enough to tend to. Let that be enough for tonight. Let your attention rest on what is actually here, not what is missing, just what is here. There is one thing the hermit says more than anything else, so often that travelers who stay with him for even a few nights find themselves saying it back to him before they leave. The desert does not hurry, and so nothing in it is ever late. The dunes do not rush to become mountains. The stars do not hurry across the sky. Even the slowest growing things out here, the old twisted trees that take 100 years to reach a person's height, are never behind schedule. They are simply moving at the only pace that was ever asked of them. You are allowed the same pace tonight. You do not need to arrive anywhere. You do not need to become anything before you are allowed to rest. The night does not require it of you, any more than the desert requires the dunes to hurry into mountains. Let your breathing slow to match the fire, low and steady. Let your body sink into the sand beneath you, still holding a little of the day's warmth, cooling now under a sky scattered with more stars than anyone could count. The hermit will keep the fire through the night. You do not need to watch it. You only need to rest. Sleep well. And thank you for joining us here at the fire with the Desert Hermit.